Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to Apply. All right, so today's a very special episode. Let's call this a reunion episode. We have a couple of Mission Matters authors coming back on the show. We got Ed Hetherington, who's president of Hetherington Advisors, LLC. We have Bradley Kistler, who's founder of VanCap and also host of the upcoming podcast, Transformative Finance. You heard it here first. We're breaking the news here, Brad. Now you got to launch the show, man. Brad is also an
Now it's real.
author, absolutely, in our most recently released Mission Matters book. So first off, Brad, Ed, welcome back. Good to see you both.
Good to see you. Glad to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
So you guys are off the book and now talking about making some more content. Talk to me. How'd this come about? I'm excited. I was talking to Jeff Norscog about this, that are like, okay, we're going to be launching a show around here. Talk to me. How'd you come up with this idea, transformative finance?
Well, a lot's gone on in the last year, right? You were with us at AED at sort of the launch of Vanguard Captive Management, and it's been an eventful year. Lots of learning and lots of great opportunities that have come up through this process. And one of those is this podcast. And Adam, you're to blame, or you're
To blame.
yeah.
Ed's like, I can feel Ed over there. What are they dragging me into now? Go ahead.
This is a great medium for discussing ideas. Both Ed and I love sort of talking about the ball game, the X and O's pieces of financing and putting this together. And as we started talking more and more about innovating and creating this virtual captive business concept, it appeared to me that there's lots of really smart finance folks out there that don't realize that a lot of what they're working on is transformative, is differentiated and strategic. And the way I came to know that is because when I shared it with any of my layman friends, right, anyone not in the financial industry, I would talk about some of the stuff we're talking. They're like, how does that even get done? How do you, for example, how do you find 0%? Where did you luck upon the bank that offered you that, right? Really just underscores the fact that a lot of what we do and kind of take for granted, Ed and I, is really insider ball game and not well known. And I thought there'd be a lot of value to, one, bringing the thought leaders together that have really worked on using financing strategically as a tool, as a way to unlock value for their manufacturers, but as well, kind of demystify some of this and talk about the art and science that goes into it.
It's awesome. Ed, what have you been up to? Last time we talked, we were doing an interview, if my memory serves me correctly, and we just released the book. How you been?
Actually doing quite well. As Brad said, with Vanguard, we've been trying a lot of different things and learning about a lot of different things and seeing who really our customer base really is. And I think what we're learning is that while a smaller manufacturer needs us, they might not be really ready for us, but the larger manufacturers not only need us, but might be more ready for us. And strangely enough, that might be the better opportunity for us because it's a manufacturer who's already gone through the perils of not having financing. They have scale, so that makes everything exciting in our world when there is some scale. They have an infrastructure built up around the sales process, but not necessarily the finance part of the sales process. So, it's easier in some ways to work with the larger customer than it is the smaller customer.
So I have a vision for this show, Ed. I got to tell you it. When I heard it was going to be happening and when I heard that they were bringing you into it as a guest and as a host. So this is what the vision was. When we were sitting at that Italian restaurant and I was like a fly on the wall here, listening to you guys who've been doing business with each other for a long time, some of you and your colleagues for many, many years. And I was just sitting there soaping up, like just sopping up the knowledge. I'm like, if we could create that type of environment on your show, I'm like, man, I'm a listener. I learned so much from sitting at one dinner with you guys, just hearing talking about the deal flows and then throw in some of the, hey, we were on this jet with XYZ person and give me some of those immortalized stories, like those things that I had the privilege of hearing. I was like, that was our history. I'm like, that would be a fun show.
Well, and I think that's what a podcast allows you to do. You can almost set it up as a dinner table environment and start having a conversation like that where you lead you lead with the topic of the day, but then it gets
Mm-hmm.
into, all the experiences you had that
Mm.
gets involved, I got into this business through repossessing cars in New York City in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And I always go back to that. I go back, I think I even put it in the book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My wife, we went on a date and we repossessed a few cars.
Well, better than taking a couple, you know what I mean? New Yorkers, there's two different sides of the coin on that one. No, I'm just
Yeah. So, I mean, but then that gets you into the business.
Yeah.
Some 53 years later, and billions of dollars worth of all different types of financing
Mm.
really started from collecting past due car accounts, automobile loans, and repossessing
Hmm.
them. And then here you are, 53 years later, you made a career out of it, and you have a lot of war stories. So,
Yeah. That's what I want. I want some of those war stories in there because I heard just a couple of them and I'm like, oh man, this is podcast gold.
well, I think if I remember the chapter of the book, we promised
Hmm.
for another book or another chapter one day
Yeah.
the kidnapping story. So someday we'll do that one.
Look at this doing, or an episode. Look at this doing that little cliffhanger there. That's
Yeah,
great.
there you go.
Brad, I know we're just for everybody listening, we're recording this November 19th before Thanksgiving 2025. So, looking into, obviously, you've had some growth this year. I know you've been bringing on clients and looking into 2026. What's on the agenda? I know last year you did the AED conference and you hit up some of these bigger conferences. Like, what's on the calendar so far?
Well, it's going to be a lot of the same, but I
Hmm.
will I will also echo what Ed just said. I think
Mm.
we will go into this next year with some different ideas about who our customer is, or at least
Mm.
expanded ideas of who our customer is.
Yeah.
That brings up a great point. Typically, you would not target the biggest folks when you're starting a new business. You typically
Mm.
work your way up, and but as it turns out, we spent a lot of time developing the virtual captive concept and really thinking about how it could benefit
Mm.
manufacturers of smaller scale. And somewhat of what Ed pioneered 25, 30 years ago now
Yeah.
is actually becoming a trend. And it's actually the ones that have been more slanted towards traditional captive that may be thinking that we want to go virtual. We already
Mm.
get captive benefits. We are already doing those things.
So they
We
already
want those
understand
things.
the concept. So the education piece of that too is like a little bit less. Am I understanding that right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
The fundamental concept of the virtual captive is that you're going to get
Mm.
90, 95% of the things that you want out of a captive type of arrangement
Yeah.
without the expense or the risk or the full-time employee requirements.
Hmm.
That's the idea of the virtual captive. And it's like we thought, okay, this really levels the playing field for other
Yeah.
manufacturers. If they can use these strategies, they can go and compete with guys that are much bigger than them by leveraging some of the same things that captives have known for a long time
Hmm.
in terms of the way they go about stuff. But as it
Yeah.
turns
Which
out, and
makes
it's
sense, by the way. In
which is still
theory, when
there,
you say that, it makes sense. You would
right?
think like that would be the go ahead.
Absolutely, and that is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although we've been surprised, as Ed mentions, that there's a lot of the traditional captives that are actually seeing the benefits of becoming more virtual and less
Mm.
traditional, like outsourcing some of these things. They would like
Mm.
to see. They want the products, they want the
Yeah.
services, they want the solutions, but they don't necessarily want to have to own the
Mm.
whole program. And so the
Yeah.
virtual captive model is creating a system, and that system I think makes sense whether you're a multi-billion-dollar company or
Hmm.
a few $100 million company.
I mean, in
Yeah.
some ways, it's real simple. The real simple question is, do you want to have a business that's the finance business, or do you
Hmm.
want to use financing to help you sell your equipment? Now, if you
Yep.
want to be in the finance business, then that's something that you have to be prepared to handle.
Hmm.
That comes with the raising of capital risk and a whole bunch of things. If you
Hmm.
want to just use financing as a key enabler to help you sell what you manufacture, that's a different thing. So you don't, and what we're offering you is you don't have to get into the financing business in
Mm.
order to be in the financing business.
Yeah.
And that's really our product. But if somebody wants to be in the financing business, it's another leg on the stool.
Sure.
And the interesting thing is when you are a true captive, when you're part of a company,
Mm.
you actually compete with your manufacturing arm if you're the financing arm because
Hmm.
you're going to the same owner of the chairman or whomever
Yeah.
competing for the same dollars as the manufacturer, the same headcount additions, the same technology additions. So
Mm,
in a way, you're really not as much as a partner in some ways as a virtual captive, where the
mm,
virtual captive is solely about how do we help you sell more equipment,
mm,
and we don't compete with you for that capital or other resources from the corporate
hmm.
well.
That's an excellent point, right? What
Yeah.
starts out in the traditional captive model as support for the manufacturer sometimes gets as big
Hmm.
or as the actual manufacturing business. And so now you're really competing for priorities and resources more so than you've
Yeah.
lost sort of your ally and now you're like competing in
So,
some
so
ways.
if, yeah. So if your previous avatar was, let's say, a certain size manufacturer that maybe didn't have a captive yet, and now you're looking at a larger manufacturer that does have maybe a captive program in place, but going more virtual is going to be beneficial. What would be some of those benefits that these larger companies that you're targeting would get from this? Like, what would be some of the takeaways to why they'd want to start heading the virtual direction?
Well, if they already have a captive, in some instances, they can actually sell their portfolio
Mm,
to let us get involved with selling their portfolio and
mm-hmm,
gain cash, immediate cash,
mm.
and then in effect we open up the virtual captive the next day.
Wow.
That's an oversimplification,
Of course, of course.
but there's been many companies that have started a fully funded captive
Mm,
that run into maybe hard times.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so what they do is, well, the captive is profitable, so you're able to sell the captive. And
mm,
with our program, you're not only able to sell the captive, but you still have the captive-like services because
mm-hmm.
as we're selling your assets, we're going to create the virtual captive that keeps you in the business of using financing as an enabler.
Mm.
So that's now there's not a lot of these done, but that's
Yeah.
certainly an opportunity out there. And
Mm-hmm,
there was quite a few of them done in the recession,
mm-hmm,
2008, 2009. There was some earlier ones as early in the 80s.
mm-hmm,
Actually, the car companies along the way
mm-hmm,
in the 2008 and 9 used their captives and sold their captives to help fund the manufacture of cars.
mm.
So it's a vibrant thing. I mean, we're not going after that totally.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
business is still somebody who really wants to use financing. But
Mm-hmm,
this is something that we can do, and it's another way of looking at the business.
mm.
That our opportunity is bigger than just a manufacturer that wants to be in. It
Yeah.
could be somebody that wants to be in, but now really wants to be out. And there's a whole bunch of reasons other than I'm
Of
giving
course, of
where
course.
somebody might decide to be out of it. So
Mm,
Yeah, and I want to hit on those because Ed brings up a great point. I mean, this idea of being able to get the benefits but still de-risk or conserve your
mm,
capital or your resources, gain on sale accounting, right? For a lot of businesses, it certainly helps the financial perspective. But on top of that, even with those things in place, we're also talking about giving these guys an opportunity to get a lot better because
mm,
there's a lot more opportunity out there. They're not limited necessarily to technology they've built in house, or they're not necessarily
mm.
limited to the capital constraints that they've built internally. You can go to the market
Yeah.
through Ed's a big proponent of the RFP process and a real coordinated
Mm-hmm,
strategic RFP process where you bring the right people to the party and you put the right agreements together. And by virtue of doing that, you start to open up more
mm.
opportunities for your captive.
Would it be
And
accurate to say that that's almost like a restructuring process, but voluntary? And when you do it, you might come out of the other side. Well, you would, or else you wouldn't do it, obviously. But when you come out of the other side, you maybe have some benefits there that you're like, whoa, I didn't even know that was possible.
for sure, if it's
Like
done right,
that'd be the goal. That'd be the goal ultimately. I mean,
yeah, I mean the biggest thing typically, what spurs it is some need for cash,
hmm.
or some reason not to use cash for something that's not the core business.
Mm,
So, and that's the key thing. Whether when we're having initial conversations with a
mm,
manufacturer that doesn't have the captive, the fully funded captive, but
mm,
wants to use financing, one of the first questions we ask is, okay, do you want to be in the finance business, or do you just want to be an enabler of using financing as an enabler?
mm,
That's kind of the key takeaway you got to bring up. And then obviously, when we suggest both things, We kind of tell them the pros and the cons. Well, okay, if you want to be in the finance business, here's the good things, here's the bad things. If you want to be a virtual, here's what you get, and here's what you don't get. And really, where do you see your company slotting in? And more, I believe manufacturers are leaning more towards focusing on core products, what their core base is. Because
Like
financing,
specializing, yeah.
yeah, financing is something different, and
Mm-hmm.
clearly the leader of that, starting a finance company to help sell their equipment, refrigerators, GE, going
Mm-hmm.
back years and years ago, look at how big GE Capital became, and actually in some ways became a bigger earner than the manufacturing arm. So that's a difference. So they decide we want to be in the finance business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're fully in. And then in actuality, they actually through GE Capital help other manufacturers through vendor programs and things of that nature. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really that's the starting point. Do you want to
Mm-hmm.
be in the finance business? Is that your goal? Is that what you want, or do you just want to use financing to be the enabler of helping you sell equipment? What's your core business? And and again, as I said, I think more and more companies are less inclined to want to be in the finance business right now, and more inclined to saying, "How do I use financing to help me sell equipment? What's the best
Mm-hmm.
way of doing that?"
Yeah. I want to circle back to this podcast for a moment longer. Brad, what are you, Transformative Finance? What kind of guests are you planning on bringing on? Like, what's that going to look like? Tell me a little bit about the vision. I know these things change,
I,
by the way, all the time. So I know
yeah.
that, but like, what's the initial thought? I need to make some history today.
Well, okay, so it is like you said. I understand it's going to change as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
The impetus again for all this was really meeting Ed and starting to have these conversations. You referenced that dinner conversation. I get more
Mm-hmm.
out of those conversations.
I want some
The
private
the
jet
unofficial convers.
convos. I want the
Yeah,
war stories. They're great.
yeah, I ask Ed a lot of business related stuff and I
Yeah.
learned from that, but it's usually the story around the story that he's
Mm-hmm.
using to explain something that actually becomes the most important thing for me, the learning, right? Like, oh wow, right? And Ed's big on that there's the fundamentals and execution and the core of this stuff has got to be there before you can do any of the stuff, the fluff on top. Any of the great ideas only work if it's
Mm-hmm.
if it's founded on these same principles that he's seen forever, right?
Yeah.
So you have Ed who and is he's modest as they come and looks at all this as very straightforward basic business, and yet the guy that was just talking about finding his way into this business started out by he had some muscle and was willing to go into some neighborhoods and pick up cars, but some other do some jobs some other people probably weren't willing to do.
Yeah.
Ends up
I
being a
wasn't.
guy
I
that
wouldn't have did it.
no, heck
I'm
no,
good.
no. Ed's got a little bit more size and a little more toughness than us, Adam. But it's something that 50 years later, Ed is regarded widely as a thought leader and a pioneer in the way he approached captive business and the way he de-risked things and built coalitions, built partnerships with
Mm-hmm.
to go, and the products that he provided were every bit on par with the largest traditional captives.
Mm-hmm.
And he was out doing that through ingenuity and through partnerships and through coalitions and through strategy and not through necessarily building another GE Capital, right? Which is another way
Mm-hmm.
to do it. You can just build a business, a finance business to support all those things, or you can go out and find those partnerships and build those programs and do those things. And so when Ed was doing this, this wasn't a thing, right? Ed
Mm-hmm.
again, I know I don't want to get his feathers up because he'll want to take this in another direction. But when he was the stuff that he was doing and the stuff he was thinking about and the types of partnerships he built, he might have seen parts of these things from other people, but these were not normal. And I know when I met him in 2016, I was blown away by what he was doing even in 2016, that a lot of these ideas were still not mainstream or in the finance industry. So, and still today,
Mm-hmm.
right? Still today, when on the front side of this business development side, these
Mm-hmm.
conversations are still, they kind of blow people's minds that the stuff is available. And again, Ed would just say, well, it's always been available. You just got to
Yeah.
be smart and put two and two together and build one step at a time. But it's pretty cool stuff. And so that's where the podcast also comes from, because I think
Mm.
I want to sit down with Ed, with others like Ed.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're referencing Steve Grosso and that conversation. And it was like, not only was that a great conversation, right? And so much
Mm-hmm.
learning there, but you wouldn't even think Ed or Steve liked each other during the conversation, and then it comes out, right? Because they just kind of go at each other, and there's all this learning that happens, and then you realize that they've got this close friendship of all
Yeah.
these years and have seen these things transpire. So I think that is, whether it's selfish or not, I think that that's something that needs to be brought
Mm,
out. I think there's a
mm,
lot of interest. I know from people in the industry and outside the industry that share that with me, and
mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think this. Well, I don't have exactly. You should ask me who the guests were. Well, I don't have all this dialed in. I don't think there were guests that really, if they're in the finance industry and they've done this for a long time and they've
Yeah.
been witnessed, they're a candidate for me
Yeah.
because they probably, if they're like Ed, know more and have
Mm-hmm.
experienced more and have done more than they even understand they've done, right? They
Yeah.
just feel like they've been in the middle of it. But from my perspective, someone coming from,
Yeah.
again, 35 years in the industry, right? Yet I was totally blown away with my first few
Mm-hmm.
interactions with Ed because I'd never learned any of these concepts, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
he thought were, pretty straightforward. So it's going to be a great
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
I think you should bring out some manufacturers too. I want to hear from some
Oh,
people that
absolutely.
are like that are out there like building. Like that one guy we met, I forgot his name already, but he had that interesting. Was it a not a? It was a. Oh, he was building some piece of equipment. We met with him on at AED. It was it wasn't a forklift. Was he in the forklift business? I don't remember, but his business.
He was building a compact tractor.
That's what it was, a compact tractor. It was fascinating. Oh, he was gonna go into the forklift business next. I think he said he was doing. That's what it was. I think something along those lines. Like that guy was fascinating. I'm like, man, to have him on the show, be a great interview and talk about how he built his business and what he's doing. He carved a nice little niche and he was going after something completely different after. I was like, wow, that's a I feel like there's a lot of interesting personalities in this industry.
Adam, there absolutely be manufacturers because the manufacturers are the ones that need the creativity
Mm,
that these programs that are the genesis of these programs. So it's like
mm-hmm.
they want to sell something, they want to capture market share, they want to beat out their
Yep.
competition, or maybe they want to sell something that isn't getting a lot of attention from a financing perspective. They've got to
Mm-hmm.
solve it themselves. Ed's got a history of taking things that were not existing previously and making them exist, whether it
Yeah.
was a program or how he solved through certain things. I'll just say real quick,
Yeah.
today it's commonplace to finance things like software and technology and other things that when I started in the industry was not, right. Those
Mm-hmm.
were not hard assets, and so those were seen as difficult to finance, and someone figured that out. And we've got someone in our office now that's working on
Mm-hmm.
robotics, which again, it's not a thing today.
Yeah.
Finance companies are not really there yet. One day it will be. The robotics is going to be the future, and it will be something that is widely financed 10 years from now, but it's not now. It's so fun to be at the beginning stages of that
Mm,
and have those conversations with those manufacturers. Say, well, there's no finance companies that'll touch us right now. They don't understand what we do. They don't get the value proposition,
mm-hmm.
and so nobody will do this. And so this is what we're doing, and start to have those conversations again that for me now sound reminiscent of other things that I take for granted today that are being financed that seemingly were difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But Ed's got the hard asset stories where it was problem solving, it was ingenuity, it was coalition building that would create a solution, and something that's easily financed today is totally taken for granted, but might have been difficult before. So, and now new markets are created, new opportunities for manufacturers are created. Even his work with Doosan and previously Ingersoll Rand was, motivated by some things that might have been thought impossible
Mm-hmm.
lay for lay finance people, right? Like, hey, we want a big finance company without any finance people or use of our capital. We don't want to use our capital and we don't want to take a bunch of risk. Okay. For most people, that's all right. So
Yeah.
you don't want to be in the finance business, right? But
Yeah.
For Ed, it's like, oh, that's a challenge that we're solving, right? So,
Yeah. Well,
Well,
this has
the
been
interesting thing, real quickly,
mm-hmm.
when you talk about moving away from hard assets, I spent quite a bit of time financing franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And, for the most part, those are restaurants. And, like the first three things you learn in the finance business is don't finance restaurants, don't finance restaurants, don't finance restaurants. Oh, and by the way, don't finance restaurants.
Yeah.
But you got to look at something differently. If you're financing a franchise, like a McDonald's or a Burger King, you're not really financing restaurants. You're financing a proven business concept.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the way you look at something. You can look at it very negative,
Mm.
that it's a restaurant, but then now you have this company, this franchise organization that has a lot of data,
Yeah.
about what this restaurant is on, Fifth and Main and not Fourth and Main, and
Mm,
so there's a whole bunch of things. So now you're financing something with a lot of good information
mm.
that helps you minimize that risk. And you don't say, I'm financing a restaurant. You say, I'm financing a proven business concept. And so that
Yeah.
changes the game.
Mm.
Right. Right. Right.
Ed, Brad, this has been fun, man. I'm glad to have you both back on the show to catch up and see what's going on and to announce this transformative finance podcast. So, that being said, Ed, if somebody wants to learn more about Hetherington Advisors and to reach out or connect with you, or Brad, if somebody wants to connect about VanCap, how do people do that?
Just go to the website, Hetherington Advise LLC, or, call us at, our number, 602-507-6067, and we'll be happy to talk to you.
Awesome. And Brad, if someone wants to connect with VanCap,
Yeah, well, it's real simple. It's vancap.com, and I'm bkissler at vancap.com, and that's probably the best way. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn and other things, but that's my full-time gig, and that's what I'm most excited about. Well, and aspiring podcaster. So
come on, man.
those are the
Whenever
plans
you're a
for
host, it's
26.
in. That's what I'm talking about. This is awesome. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links to the website in the show notes so you can just click on them and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Ed, Brad, till the next time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.